There's a feeling that shows up for a lot of business owners that almost never gets talked about. It doesn't show up in meetings. It doesn't show up on dashboards. And it doesn't show up in the numbers. It usually shows up when things are quiet. You close your laptop, you lean back in your chair, you stop doing. And that's when you feel it. Not panic, not fear, just a quiet, persistent tension. You've already checked the numbers, more than once. The bank balance doesn't look bad, invoices are out, some payments are pending, but that's normal. Nothing looks broken. So you tell yourself you're fine. You tell yourself you should relax, but your body doesn't seem to agree. Your mind starts drifting ahead. Payroll, upcoming expenses, that client who usually pays a little late, that decision you made recently that still feels unsettled. None of these thoughts are dramatic. They don't shout, they just sit there. Like background noise you can't turn off. What makes this uncomfortable is that you don't have a clear reason to feel this way. You felt real stress before. You know what crisis feels like. This isn't that. This is quieter, subtler, harder to explain. From the outside, things look fine. Revenue is better than it used to be. The business is bigger, there's momentum. People might even tell you you're doing well. So you keep this feeling to yourself. You don't want to sound ungrateful. You don't want to sound dramatic. You just keep going. You tell yourself this is normal. More responsibility, more moving parts, more pressure. That's just part of growth, right? But something doesn't sit right. Because this feeling didn't start when things were hard. It started when things became more complex. Earlier on, the business was simpler. There was less money, sure. But there were fewer variables. Problems were obvious. Mistakes showed up quickly. Decisions felt clearer. Now, everything overlaps. Money moves in different directions. Timing matters more. Delays ripple outward. And suddenly, instincts that used to work don't feel as reliable. You notice how often you check the bank account now, not because you expect bad news, but because you're looking for reassurance, a quick confirmation that everything is okay. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you check again later, just to be sure. At some point, you realize something you don't love admitting. You don't actually know what the next few weeks look like. Not clearly. You have expectations, you have assumptions, but you don't have certainty. So your mind keeps trying to fill in the gaps, running scenarios, scanning for risk, staying alert. That's when the tension shows up, not as a thought, as a feeling. You might call it stress, but it doesn't feel sharp enough for that. It feels more like vigilance, like your system doesn't feel safe enough to power down. You notice how this affects your decisions. You hesitate more than you used to. You delay things that shouldn't feel heavy. You second-guess choices you would have made easily before. And that bothers you, because you're not indecisive. You didn't build this by being unsure. At some point, you try to reason with yourself. If revenue keeps growing, this will go away. If I just push through this phase, things will settle. If I work a little harder, it'll feel safer. But those thoughts don't bring relief. They just add pressure. Because part of you already knows something important. More revenue hasn't actually made this feeling disappear. You've seen that firsthand. There were good months, strong months. And yet, the tightness stayed. That's when doubt starts to creep in. Not about the business, about you. You wonder if other people feel this way too, or if they've figured something out that you haven't. You don't ask. You assume everyone else is handling it better. You notice how confidence feels harder now, how growth feels heavier instead of lighter. Your mind jumps ahead more often, not in an ambitious way, in a protective way. Always preparing, always calculating. It's exhausting. But stopping feels risky. So you tell yourself this is just what leadership feels like. Carrying things quietly, holding it together, not letting it show. Maybe that's true, but something still feels off because this tension doesn't show up when revenue drops. It doesn't show up during obvious problems. It shows up when things are working. It shows up after growth, after complexity increases, after the business becomes harder to see all at once. That's the part most people don't talk about. The business didn't become fragile. It became opaque. More money moving, more timing decisions, more dependencies layered on top of each other. And opacity does something subtle to the human brain. It keeps it alert. You might not have language for it, but your nervous system does. It stays on, just in case. That's why even on good days, you don't fully relax. You don't miss the struggle of the early days, but you do miss the clarity. Back then, problems were obvious. Now, they're buried in timing. You're not afraid of failure. You're uncomfortable with surprises, not knowing what's actually tight, not knowing how much room you really have, not knowing which decisions matter most right now. So your mind stays busy because it thinks it has to. This is the part no one really names, the space between doing well and feeling safe. From the outside, it looks like success. From the inside, it feels like constant mental tracking. You replay scenarios. What if this payment comes in late? What if this cost increases? What if that decision tightens things later? Not because you expect disaster, but because you don't have clear sightlines. And when there are no clear sightlines, your mind fills the gap. That's when the pressure sneaks in to places it doesn't belong. Sleep, focus, patience. You become sharper, more guarded, not because you're scared, but because you're compensating. You tell yourself once things stabilize, you'll relax. But the definition of stable keeps moving. The business grows, and so does the complexity. What's important to understand, and what often gets missed, is that this feeling isn't a failure signal. It's not a weakness, and it's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's information. It's your system reacting to something it can't clearly see. And until that changes, no amount of effort and no amount of revenue will fully quiet it. This video isn't meant to rush you toward an answer. It's meant to give language to something you may already feel. Because once something has language, it stops feeling personal. And once it stops feeling personal, it becomes something you can work with. That quiet cash tension, it's not random, and you're not alone in it. And maybe the most frustrating part of all of this is how invisible it feels. There's no clear moment you can point to, no obvious mistake, no single number you can blame. Just a growing sense that you're carrying more in your head than you should have to. You don't talk about it because it sounds vague. You don't write it down because it feels intangible. So it stays with you. Quiet, unresolved, waiting to be understood.